see can you see a
Yes.
photographing? Okay, great. Oh, can you still see it?
Yes, sir.
I can't. Where did it go? Bear with me. I can't see it. Hmm. Try it
We
again.
see a pelican having lunch.
Yeah, I know, but I can't see it.
Uh-oh.
Share. Hmm. Okay, I can see it now. Um, this is the presentation topic is photographing nature's food chain, and this is my email address if anyone wants to get in touch with me to, whatever, discuss slides or places, what have you. Today's objectives or my objectives for you are to describe the equipment I use and the software I use, to show the locations of the photos of the food chains, to define what food chains are and what VORs are, and show photos of nature's food chains and explain hopefully one new nature fact for you, to you. So earlier you were asking whether there'll be a lot of blood and gore. This is the only blood you'll see. No humans or animals were hurt in the making of this presentation, and I emphasize making. However, it's not cruelty free. So what you're about to see are images that I've taken over 20 years that have to deal with animals eating animals in the food chain. So every slide that I show you, I will tell you where I took the picture. This particular one was at the Chattahoochee Nature Center, and I used a little bit of Photoshop because pitcher plants really don't eat human fingers. Okay, now you might want to do a screen capture on this screen. What this screen is showing you are all of the places that I photographed these um, photos from, and a lot of them are close to home. And if you haven't been to them, it might be a good checklist for you. So go ahead and take a second if you want and do a screen capture. And as I go through the presentation, you'll see what photos came from what area. But when you're out photographing nature's food chain, you really, unless you go to a trip like for bears eating salmon or so, Africa, um, you're really not prepared to photograph animals eating animals because that just happens when you're out there just photographing. So you'll get to see what I mean. My equipment, um, a very unorthodox photographer. I have one camera that I shoot with, and I purchased it in 2017. It's a Sony RX10 Mark IV. It has a 24 to 600 millimeter lens. It's not replaceable, it's part of the camera. So you can do wide angle, macro, and telephoto all at the same time. So when I'm out there shooting, let's say a flower or an insect in macro, and in the distance a bird is on a tree, I can quickly move over to 600 millimeters. It weighs 2 pounds and 7 ounces. It shoots 20 megapixel images. Its burst is 24 frames per second. It does 40 times slow motion, and you'll see some of the images, videos that I show you, at 960 frames per second. So if you shoot at 960 frames per second and play it back at 24, it's 40 times slow motion. And it goes from wide open time to 1 over 32 thousandth of a second. And it's a Zeiss lens with a 1-inch sensor, which is a 2.7 times crop factor. I carry this on my belt. The bottom of the camera, I put a little pin and I have a little belt clip that fits on my belt, and so it's very portable, and that's what I like about this camera. Okay, so here are my typical settings. I usually shoot in manual mode. Auto ISO, I used to keep my ISOs between 100 and 400 because of noise, but with today's software, Topaz denoise, I'm able to go much higher than that, so I'm not limited to that, range anymore. Typical f-stops are 2.4 to f8. I try to create bokeh in my images when I'm out there photographing. And the highest speeds I usually use are 1 over 32 hundredth of a second for a songbird in flight. And other than that, I try to keep the speed at 1 over the millimeter length of my lens. So if I'm at 600 millimeters, I try to keep it at 1 over 600. As I said, it's one lens and it's 24 to 600 millimeters. So I can be shooting a landscape, I can be shooting a macro, or I can be shooting a bird real far from where I'm photographing. The software I use is Adobe Lightroom Classic, 95%. I'm up to 243,000 images in Lightroom right now.
He has 239 images.
No, 200,
In
actually 243,000 images. This slide's a little bit old. In the last couple of trips. So Lightroom has the capability of, I know some people have gone up into the million image range, and it still functions very quickly. I don't have any problem with it at all. I use about 5% of the time I use Photoshop, the remove tool and layers. And I use Topaz Photo AI quite often in my nature photography to sharpen and reduce noise. Final Cut Pro, I operate on a Mac system, and Final Cut Pro is what I use for my video editing. And iStudio Publishing is for my books and email blog. I published up to I'm on my 15th book now, which is 238-page books, which show places I've been and things that I photographed. So I use iStudio Publisher for that and Blurb for where I publish. And here's a story that motivated me to do this presentation on food chains. I was photographing an osprey eating a bass up in a tree. This particular photo was taken at the Circle B Bar Reserve in Florida. If you've never been there and you like to shoot birds of prey and birds that eat, it's a magnificent place to go to, and that's in Florida, not far from Lakeland. Okay, so this is the image that I was photographing before I got interrupted. So let me play this for you. It's just a little snippet. It's showing the osprey up on the tree eating this bass. And he said, she said. She said, meaning Nat, my wife, Mike might in excitement. I said, not now, I'm photographing an osprey eating a fish. She said, but there's a raccoon crossing the path. And I turned to look. And sure enough, there was this raccoon racing across the path. And this was at Circle B Bar Reserve. So I took a picture of it and then went back to shooting my osprey. And then she said, Mike, 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 in panic, hiding behind me. And I go, not now, I'm photographing an osprey eating a fish. And then she said, hurry, look, 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 look. And I turned to look, and no joke, there was a 10-foot huge gator chasing the raccoon. So it was at this point in time that I realized I could have been part of the food chain of this alligator. And this was at Circle B Bar Reserve. Did you know that alligators can run 10 to 35 miles per hour? And do you know that a 70-year-old can run 4 to 6 miles per hour? With my bad hip, I'm more like less than 2 miles per hour. Anyone see a problem with that? Yeah. So what should you do if you encounter an alligator and you're 70 years old and you run 4 to 6 miles per hour and the gator runs 10 to 35 miles per hour? A lot of people say run serpentine. Well, you try running serpentine and the alligator's thinking, I can't believe he's running serpentine. And the alligator says, I'll catch him when he's done. So in reality, you can't outrun an alligator on dry land. He can outrun you. But here's the good news. In a 73-year period, there have only been 442 attacks and only 26 fatalities. So that means every 3 years is a fatality due to an alligator. If an alligator really wanted to eat people, they'd be out in the street, hunting people. But they're really not interested in people. Although occasionally, if a person brings a dog or a child sitting by a river or what have you, they can be eaten by an alligator. So, the place where I photographed the alligator and the raccoon was at the Circle B Bar Reserve. And if you see the arrow on the right, you'll notice it's pointing to a spot on Alligator Alley Trail. And this particular trail when I last checked, it was closed due to the storm that came through there. But it might be open now. So if you're interested in going, I put the phone number up on the left-hand corner of the screen with the extension of the ranger, and he can tell you if it's opened or not. So what I put together for you is a look at what food chains are all about. And it all starts off with the sun, soil, nutrients, and water that helps the producers grow, producers being grass, and I'll show you examples of that. And then the primary consumer eats the producer, the secondary consumer eats the primary consumer, and the tertiary consumers eats the secondary consumer. So I'll take you through this, and I've put together 10 different um, food chains that I photographed over the years so you can see what goes on out there. And it won't be too gory, I promise. And then, of course, you have, after items die, you have the decomposers. So let's start off with the sun. Here's some photos regarding the sun. The sun is the primary source of energy. Okay, this was a picture taken at Foley Beach, South Carolina. If you've never been there, if you've been to Driftwood Beach on Jekyll, you'll enjoy the Foley Beach in South Carolina. This was a sunrise photo. Soaking up the rays. This is a great blue heron, and it's a very unusual pose. I've only seen this once in all the years that I've been photographing nature. And this great blue heron, this pose reminds me of living in New York City, riding the New York City subway. This guy walks into the subway with a raincoat, and all of a sudden he opens up the raincoat. This is the flasher pose. Okay, so the great blue heron opens its wings inverted, and it does this for thermoregulation in the sun, if it's either cold or hot, for parasite removal, and for drying purposes. There are other animals that use the sun for drying, and the name of this animal is an anhinga. An anhinga is a bird that swims underwater to catch its fish, and the anhinga doesn't have oil glands. So this pose is called the drying posture, and it uses this to dry its wings after it's been swimming in the water. Otherwise, the anhinga couldn't take flight with the wet wings. It would be weighed down. So they lack oil glands where other birds have oil glands to, shed the water. This was again at Circle B Bar Reserve in Florida. This is my deck. And if you've ever seen a gray squirrel do this, the gray squirrel is in a pose called splooting. And splooting allows the gray squirrel to relax and to cool down. And I have a lot of squirrels in my backyard, and they all come on the deck to cool down like that. And TL means Twin Lakes. I live in a development called Twin Lakes. This is another squirrel, and this is a leucistic squirrel. It looks like an albino squirrel. However, it has reduced melanin, and you notice its eyes is not pink. So it's not albino, it's just a genetic defect. This particular squirrel's here in Georgia, and his name is Snow. He actually has a name, and he's splooting like the other squirrel is. And if you ever go to the Roswell Visual Arts Center in the Roswell Area Park, his home is in the trees right behind the Roswell Visual Arts Center. And he's become a mascot for the Roswell Visual Arts Center. So I've done a series of photos for them for Snow, and they put it in their advertisements, and they make things that they can sell with images of Snow. Okay, let's get back to the food chains now. Let's take a look at the producers. The sun, soil, and nutrients and water produce the producers. Plant life is the first level of the food chain. It's known as autotrophs, and they are the producers. Um, Around the corner from where I live, one of my neighbors has this ginkgo biloba tree. And the reason I like this as a producer is this tree is a living fossil of over 290 million years, predating dinosaurs. And this tree has many health benefits as herbal supplements to improve memory, to enhance cognitive function, and to support cardiovascular health. Um, I used to take ginkgo biloba supplements, but I forgot where I put my supplements. So this is in Twin Lakes. The next place I wanted to show you, which I like from a standpoint of grass, where grasses use sunlight through photosynthesis to create foods for other animals. And this particular area is grasses at the bottom of the food chain, which are producers. And just to show you the magnitude of these mounds, over there in that circle red is a truck. So these mounds are in Etowah Indian mounds in Cartersville, and you can climb up the mounds. They have staircases, they have a museum, and if you've never been there, I highly recommend you go there. So lots of animals eat grass as part of their food chain. Also, plants use sunlight as photosynthesis to create food. These plants are producers. Um, it's a little bit late in the season, but Fawcett Farms have sunflowers in Dawsonville, Georgia. And it's just a beautiful place to do photography. If you've never been there, plan on a trip next year. So we've covered producers. I'll give you, a little bit of an idea of producers. Other producers might be aquatic plants and things of that nature. Now, what I want to get into is primary consumers, those things that eat plants. And I want to start off with defining a vor, which is called a herbivore. A herbivore is a consumer in the food chain that eats plants. Um, these are caterpillars that are demolishing this plant. And this is Gulf fritillary caterpillars. If you've ever seen those orange and white speck butterflies, these are the caterpillars of the Gulf fritillaries. Um, I was shocked at watching these caterpillars demolish plants as their food. This was at Smith Gilbert's Garden. If you've never been to Smith Gilbert's Garden, Smith Gilbert's Garden is off of Highway 41, a little bit north of town center. And it's a great place for butterflies, flowers, koi ponds, a little bit of waterfalls. I highly recommend. And I think, I think you enjoy going there. It's a real close trip. an afternoon trip, but you can spend a whole day there. This is a video I took of a great southern white laying its eggs. Now, what was interesting about this for me was the great southern white is laying its eggs on this plant, host plant, and I came back a week later and this plant was completely finished. It was completely eaten by the caterpillar. So watch how this great southern white at 40 times slow motions lays its eggs. I never got a chance to photograph anything like this, but with my camera, I was able to capture it at 40 times slow motion. And it's just amazing to me how many eggs one butterfly lays. And this just gives you an idea of what those eggs look like. As I said, a week later, the caterpillars are out and completely ate that plant. So the herbivore food chain looks something like this. You have grass or acorns or what have you as the producer. The mammal comes in and eats the grass as the primary consumer. So some of you might recognize this. This is in Cades Cove for those of you going up to Townsend on the trip this week. You'll recognize Cades Cove here. And these are horses that are the producers are the grass. The horses are the primary consumers, and these are in the Tennessee in the Great Smoky Mountains, Cades Cove. Now, what I'd like to do is talk about primary, secondary, and tertiary consumers. And the way I've broken it up is the first three are going to be insectivores. So I'm going to take you through the primary consumers, the secondary consumers, and if there is a tertiary consumer. So the primary consumer we're going to start off with is insectivores, which feeds on insects. And this was in my backyard. Uh, at, this is an Eastern Phoebe taken at 130 3200th of a second to freeze the motion. And I wasn't photographing this Eastern Phoebe. I was photographing a different bird. It came across, I took my camera, hit it at the right moment, right in front of it going after an insect. So other producers, primary are insects, and we'll take a look at that. This is a fork-tailed bush katydid on a hibiscus, and this is at the Chattahoochee Nature Center. And I was at the State Botanical Gardens of Georgia, and I was photographing a hummingbird. Now, the beauty of my camera is I'm at 600 millimeters photographing a hummingbird, and suddenly I saw an anole, the lizard, on a leaf, and then the anole jumps and grabs this this grasshopper. So the primary consumer, the producer is the leaf, primary consumer is the grasshopper, and the secondary consumer is the anole. And I'm very fortunate. You don't go out there expecting to see this when you're photographing. It's at the decisive moment in time that it happens. And if you're lucky, you capture it. And this particular one was in focus. Not all of my images are in focus because I'm not out there trying to get an animal in a food chain, but it just so happens that this one turned out very well. And I love Carolina anoles. They have their what's called their dewlaps, and their dewlaps are under their necks, and I love videoing them. So you'll see this Carolina anole with its dewlap, and then it also does a feature called head bobbing. And you've seen these anoles. They change colors. They go from green to brown, and that's a protection mechanism. But why it's doing what it's doing is a territorial dominance, a courtship, and a defense. So it's trying to keep males away from its females, and it's trying to attract the female. And I just get the biggest kick out of watching them. And that was at Smith Gilbert Garden also. So insectivores in the food chain starts off with some flower or grass. You have an insect as your primary consumer, and then you have your secondary consumer. So this is a photo. Um, you know how incidences in your life and photos in your life, you find the one photo that has the most meaning to you. This is my photo. I was photographing this presidential lotus, and in flies a bee and another bee, and they spiraled around the core. Their antennas touched, and the proboscis of one bee, that the proboscis is this tongue, is feeding nectar to the other bee. And I just love this photo because it's showing in nature where one species, the bee, the bumblebee or honeybee, is feeding nectar to the other bee to allow it to get back to the hive. And I spoke to a beekeeper about this, and he told me what was going on here. I'd never had seen this before. So I went in the literature to check to see what what who documented this, how long has it been documented, and the the I call it kissing bees, and it's taken many awards in nature photography, and it's called trophallaxis for the bee feeding nectar to the other bee. And what amazes me about this is in nature we can get along together just fine like this. And it's so difficult as we as humans, and I wish humans could take a lesson from these kissing bees. This is in Perry's Water Garden. If you haven't been up there, Perry's Water Garden is a place where you can buy lotus plants. They have lots of lotus plants in different pools, and lots of insects and animals come to the lotus plants. Well, anyway, I found out that in the Minoan culture back in the 1800 BC, a princess there had this necklace built for her of kissing bees. So it was amazing to me that this dated back 1800 BC, and this is in a museum in Greece, if you ever get over to it. Okay, and then you have your primary consumer is this yellow jacket, and the secondary consumer is the Juro spider. The Juro spider is an invasive species that came from China or Japan on a crate into the United States. And I'm sure you all have Juros in your neighborhood. They've totally taken over in Georgia. They're beautiful spiders if you like spiders. And I just recently photographed one capturing a baby bat in its web. So this is just a bee. And this was taken right out of my front door on a bush. So insectivore's food chain consists of a plant, a bug. In this case, it'll be a dragonfly, and then the tertiary consumer will be a bird. So a plant in this case is taken over by a bug, and this is a large milkweed bug. This was taken at the Chattahoochee Nature Center. This dragonfly was taken right outside of the butterfly house in the Chattahoochee Nature Center. I was just sitting there waiting for my friends to come out, and I was just sitting down outside the butterfly garden on a little chair, and this dragonfly stopped by to be photographed. I like it because the compound eye just turned out beautiful on it from a macro standpoint. But this is a female blue dasher dragonfly. Eastern pondhawk dragonfly in this example is eating a two-line spittlebug. Um, Dragonflies, we have a lot to learn from them. They can predict and they have the ability to catch bugs in flight, mosquitoes and other flying bugs. And they have the ability, like a hummingbird, to go up, down, backwards, and forwards. They're amazing creatures. And this was in Newman's Wetland. Hopefully, you've all been there. If not, and you like to photograph animals, Newman's Wetland, lots of dragonflies, turtles, snakes, things of that nature. This is a red-winged blackbird that captured dragonflies. I've never been able to photograph this in Georgia. I was at my cousin's wedding and I went out with my camera, and it shows a tertiary consumer, the bird, eating the dragonflies. And this was in Michigan, in the Hawkwoods Nature Center. Now, this is an amazing, this is one that gives you goosebumps also. I live not far within walking distance to a lake, and go there quite often to photograph damselflies and dragonflies and things of that nature. Well, the damselflies were mating. The male grabs the female behind the neck, and then the female um, moves its part up to the male, and the male deposits sperm, and that's how the damselflies mate. The dragonflies do a similar thing. But I was out photographing a green heron fishing, and it's very hard to see, I know, because I wasn't focused in on the damselfly, but you see that damselfly there right in front of the mouth of the green heron? Well, what the green heron does is it catches that dragonfly in its beak and it holds it there. And I didn't understand why it was holding it there. It actually attracted the mate to its beak because the mate wanted, you can see the mate right over here. And he opens his mouth and swallows the one in his beak, and the other dragonfly flies in. So it was amazing to me to see a green heron never knew that it eats damselflies, and he got a two for one eating that damselflies. He got both of them. Normally, I photograph him eating fish, but not in this case. Okay, the next food chain I want to talk about is called a molluscivore. Molluscivores are creatures that feed on mollusks. And this is an example of a um, snail kite eating a mollusk. Now, this was in Paynes Prairie, and this is in Gainesville, Florida. If you ever get down to Gainesville, you got the Circle Bar B Reserve. You've got these, um, well, no, actually, the Circle Bar B Reserve is further south. You've got the butterfly. There's a beautiful butterfly rainforest at the university. You have the Paynes Prairie, and you also have other botanical gardens there. So try to make a trip to Gainesville. It's not all that far, and it's a nice weekend trip. What's interesting about the snail kite is it was considered an endangered species in 1967. In the 1990s, there were only 3,000 of them, and there are only 700 today. So I was very fortunate to be able to photograph this. Molluscivore's food chain consists of an aquatic plant, the mollusk, and then the primary and secondary consumer, usually a bird. Here's a limpkin catching a mollusk. The aquatic plants are the producers, the mollusk is the primary consumer, and the limpkin is the secondary consumer. This was photographed at Gatorland in Orlando, Florida, another great place to photograph gators and birds and just pretty much lots of different water birds. You'll find egrets and spoonbills and things of that nature. The snail kite here is eating an apple snail, and this again was at Paynes Prairie. Now I want you to look at the how this bird has adapted to apple snails. Its beak is curved, and very unlike most of the birds of prey. And look at its talons. The beak is curved actually to remove the operculum, which is the covering of the apple snails, so it can get at the meat. And then the talons are made so that it can hold the apple snails. So here's a video of the snail kite dining on an apple snail. You'll notice he's digging his beak in, trying to get the operculum, and it's a very useful tool. And you notice he just removed it. And what's interesting about this is watch how he's got the operculum there, and he's going to pull it off, but he's going to grab the little bit of flesh that's on it. And then watch what happens when he loses his balance on this limb. He repositions his right leg, and then he uses the arm to balance again. So I'm very fortunate to shoot this video of him. Like I said, there are only 700 of these creatures left in the US right now. The next thing on the food chain I'd like to talk about are the piscivores. Piscivores are animals that feed on fish. And this is a green heron catching a sunfish. This is again at Circle B Bar Reserve. Another piscivore is a belted kingfisher. This belted kingfisher is carrying a baby bass in its mouth. Now, this isn't one of my most favorite birds, the belted kingfisher. Here's some interesting facts about it. The belted kingfisher can fly up to 36 miles per hour. That's amazing to me. It's not the fastest bird, but it's one of the fastest birds. The other thing is they don't build their nests in the trees. They build their nests underground. And we have a pair of them on our lake, and I've been able to watch them build their nest and dig out tunnels. And it's usually in the bank close to the lake. And then they fly in and out with fish for the young. And what else is interesting about their underground nest is they build it at an angle so that if the lake should flood, water won't get in and kill the babies. Another interesting fact about the belted kingfisher is in normal bird species, the male is the most colorful of the species. But in the belted kingfisher, the females have a rust-colored belly band, and they are the most attractive of the two species. Something else that's very interesting about the belted kingfisher is the bioengineers and the used biometry. And in the case of the Japanese bullet train, when the Japanese bullet train was first built and it went through tunnels, they had a sonic boom, and they had to slow down the speed of the train. But what they determined was when a belted kingfisher dives into the water, there's very little splash. So what they did is they modeled the front of the Japanese bullet train after the belted kingfisher's head. And now the trains are no problem with sonic booms. And as you know, they're building faster and faster bullet trains. I have a video of this belted kingfisher. And before I show it to you, I want you to know this belted kingfisher has got a fish in its mouth and it's flying at 36 miles an hour. And I'm having a really hard time tracking it across the lake. It flies to the opposite shore of the lake. And with my 600 millimeter lens, I'm able to photograph what it does with the bass that it's caught. So there he is, and you'll notice I've been having a hard time keeping up with it. And it lands on this tree, and it's tenderizing the bass that it caught. And I'm going to slow it down here in a second. I shot it at 40 times slow motion. So you'll notice how it's tenderizing it. It's beating it against the limb of the tree. And I usually play Michael Jackson Beat It music, but I decided not to. But you see how he's just pounding it against the tree to tenderize it. Then he swallows it. Piscivorous food chain looks like this: plants, fish, and then usually a bird, typically. So this is a grass carp feeding on algae in a lake. This is at Twin Lakes. The producer is the aquatic plant. The primary consumer is the grass carp. This is an anhinga. If you remember earlier, I showed you the anhinga drying its wings. It's also called a snake bird because when it swims, after it catches the sunfish in this case, it swims with it out of the water like that until it gets to shore where it can eat it. But notice this bird has got extreme speed underwater and catches the fish underwater. Very unusual bird. Primary consumer is the fish. Secondary consumer is the anhinga. This was at Lake Morton, Lakeland, Florida. I love Lake Morton. You can sit on a bench and you can watch just about any water bird that fishes there and also others. My favorite photo at Lake Morton, well, this is a great blue heron catching a fish. I'll show you my photo on Lake Morton in a bit. This great blue heron catching a fish, this was shot at Roswell Boardwalk. For those of you who didn't know, the Chattahoochee Nature Center had 8 nests of great blue herons. And I followed them from when they mated, when they built the nest, to when the babies were born and when the babies were eating, and then finally the babies fledged. And I highly recommend next year in the spring, go to the Chattahoochee Nature Center and photograph these great blue herons. You can see that one on the bottom right is carrying nesting material, and the one on the top left is up in the pine tree nesting. And I spent probably about a month photographing these birds. And that was at the Chattahoochee Nature Center. When the great blue heron comes back to the nest, it regurgitates the bass that it caught for the siblings in the nest. So this is a photo of the great blue heron regurgitating that bass. That was done in April of this year. So now for the physics lesson. I'd be a poor engineer if I didn't give you a physics lesson. The sun is shining down on the sunfish. The reflection of the sunfish is traveling through the water, and when it hits air, since it has a different index of refraction, it bends. So the great blue heron sees that bend, and it projects down as the fish apparently looking over here. Now, if we were going to spare this fish, we would miss the actual fish because we would spare the apparent fish, which doesn't exist. And so something in the evolution of the great blue heron gave him the knowledge to go in front of and below the apparent fish. So I'm going to show you a movie of a great blue heron catching a sunfish. This was done in 2022. It's a shame that they left the basket there, but notice his neck is straight up. He's looking for the fish right now. And he's going to cock back his neck in an S shape. There he goes. And watch how he lunges forward and he catch the sunfish direct hit. We could not do that. We would be fooled by the index of refraction in the water. But the great blue heron, about 80% of the time, will nail that sunfish. And they'll always swallow it head first because they don't want the scales and the fins to obstruct, and they want it to fold shut. Now, when a great blue heron eats a catfish, because the catfish has these tremendous spines, he has to beat it just like the belted kingfisher did to remove the spines. And I've seen them do that in the wild also. Okay, this is a most interesting part of the food chain. This is a red shoulder hawk eating an Asian swamp eel. So aquatic plants, eels eat that, and then the bird is the secondary consumer. Now, you all know Marvin Price. He judged one of our meetings. Marvin and I were walking on, this was on the Roswell River Walk, and we both took this picture. And Marvin said it was an eel, and I said it was a snake. And of course, um, I Googled it, and they said there's no eels, there's no Asian swamp eels in Georgia. And he used ChatGPT. And in ChatGPT, they said that someone uh, released their aquarium into the Chattahoochee Nature Center, and it emptied into the Chattahoochee River, and now there are these Asian swamp eels. They only exist 5 places in the United States, but this is an invasive species. It doesn't belong here. But wouldn't it be cool? The primary consumer is the eel. The secondary consumer is this red-shouldered hawk. And wouldn't it be cool? And this was on the Roswell Boardwalk. Wouldn't it be cool if we had a tool that could remove all of the garbage in the trees? Because when you're out nature photography, you can't tell a bird to get in front of the twigs and sticks and limbs. It would be cool if they had a tool like that could remove all of the twigs. But that tool doesn't exist. Actually, it does. It's in Photoshop and it's called the remove tool, but you have to spend a lot of time going from here to here. Okay. The next two are a little bit more gory for that person who asked, is it going to be very gory? So I'm just giving you a precursor here. Um, and my wife says, oh no, not the little squirrel. The next two will be carnivores. A carnivore is an animal that feeds on flesh. And this is photographed in the Smoky, I'm not Smoky, in the Okefenokee Swamp. And I did a video of these owls. So this was done back in 2018. So there's actually two baby owls on there. One is facing in the opposite direction, but the this one owl is getting hair and all off of this rat that the mom is feeding it. So the another carnivore, which you wouldn't think is a carnivore, but are these humpback whales. They're bubble netting. Now, what bubble netting is the humpback whales will spin a whole ring of bubbles, forcing the krill or plankton or fish inside the bubble net, and then they'll come up with their mouths opened to grab all of the krill and plankton fish. So this is just another example of a carnivore, and this is on Resurrection Bay in Alaska. Carnivore food chain exists something like this. You have, in this case, a seed, you have a squirrel, and then you have a bird. So I feed the squirrels on my deck, and now they're in heaven right now because the acorns are falling off of the oak trees. But I usually feed them no mess blend bird seed. And if you were to x-ray one of these squirrels on my deck, this is what you would see. They're filled with nuts. Now, I've never eaten a squirrel, but for people who have, they say they have a nutty flavor. I don't know that for a fact, but maybe they do. And I have, um, we have both red-tail and red-shouldered hawks that come and eat on these well-fed squirrels in my woods. So this is a red-tailed hawk uh, eating a squirrel on a swing set that I had built many years ago. And you can see right there the teeth of the squirrel right over here. And this is the skull of the squirrel. And this is the leg or maybe the tail of the squirrel. When he gets done, There isn't much left. This is what he dropped on the ground. But what I found interesting in this is the yellow jackets came to feed on the fat in that was left over on the skin. So these are whole part of the food chain. This is a photograph of a red-shouldered hawk demonstrating mantling. What meant this, the mother had left a squirrel for these two baby red-shouldered hawks, and one of the hawks is putting its wings or mantling around the squirrel so that its sibling couldn't get anything to eat. And it's a very common behavior with red-shouldered hawks. Uh, Now, this is hard to believe also. Um, Great blue herons will eat voles, they'll eat they'll eat chipmunks, and I could not believe it when I photographed this one. This great blue heron was on the other side of the lake. There was a squirrel on the tree limb. Notice his head is in an S shape, and he's ready to lunge and get this squirrel, but fortunately for the squirrel, it jumped off before it could get it. So it was a missed opportunity for the great blue heron. Okay, we're going to look at some carnivore food chains. In this case, the grass is the producer, the rabbit is the primary consumer, secondary consumer is the hawk, and then the decay. The rabbit was at the Chattahoochee Nature Center. A hawk caught the rabbit, and this is a red tail hawk, and flew off with it. But in my neighborhood, I had a red-shouldered hawk build a nest right up in a tree, and I mean literally 15 feet from my front door. And it's carrying a rabbit to the babies, which I call aliens, and you'll see why in a second. The aliens, these are the babies. They look just like aliens to me. If there were aliens, they would be it. And the red-shouldered hawk chicks, I would go out and photograph them, but one day a storm blew both chicks out of the nest. The red-shouldered hawks fledged in 35 to 46 days. They were almost ready to fledge, but they didn't quite make it, and both of them died. So that's where your decomposers come in. When something dies, a decomposer will put it back into soil and water, back into the environment. And I have some pictures of some decomposers. If you've been to the Chattahoochee Nature Center, you might have seen this decomposer, which breaks down dead plants and animal materials into small particles. This is a British soldier lichen. Hopefully you've all been to the Chattahoochee Nature Center. Have you all seen this? You probably walked right by it. Okay. Um, I put in this clownfish. It doesn't belong there, but to me it looked like coral. So I had to Photoshop it in. That's from the aquarium. But in the Nature Center, when you first walk out of the main building to the Nature Center, there's this little marquee here showing the native gardens. And on top of right on top of the post is this lichen. And the lichen will deteriorate the wood. And that's where I took that photograph. With the 600 millimeter lens, I photographed that lichen, and it looks just like sea coral, to me anyway. So if you ever get to go there, take a look on top of that first signpost. Then fungi are things that decompose items. And this fungi is a green spored parasol. And you know some engineer looked at this, the one on the left, and what do you suppose he saw? Well, what the engineer saw was the IBM Selectric. And for those of you who remember the days of the IBM Selectric, that was the ball head that allowed the typewriters to type. And that, that's what it reminded me of anyway. There are other omnivore, there are the other vores, omnivores, detrivores, and photovores. You wouldn't think a black carpenter ant is an omnivore, but these are black carpenter ants moving a roach leg. So they're meat eaters. In addition to eating vegetables, they also like meat. And so an omnivore is a black carpenter ant. This was at the CNC on the boardwalk. Gray squirrels eat mushrooms, eat nuts, but they also will eat birds if they catch a bird. You don't often see that. I don't have a picture of it, but I've read about it. This is right in my front yard. Um, these are these are mockingbirds, and they eat worms and holly and other flowers. So they're also part of that. A detrivore is something that feeds on dead material. And this is a flesh fly eating on poop. It looks like squirrel poop or something like that. This is an eastern tiger swallowtail butterfly getting nutrients from an animal poop in the Okefenokee swamp. And these are eastern tiger swallowtail butterflies gathering nutrients from the ground. And this is Perry's Water Garden in Franklin, North Carolina, where I shot the kissing bees. What do you think a photovore is? Photovore is not a photographer that feeds on light. A photovore is a robot that feeds on light. That's how it gets its energy. And, we're just getting into the AI world, and they actually named photovores for robots that recharge with light, like solar cells. There's a whole lot of other vores. I'm not going to get into them, but there's like bats eat fruits and things of that nature, and other animals like snakes eat eggs and so on and so forth. So, or birds like robins eat mealyworm, mainly worms. So you get an idea of other vores that are out there. So hopefully, the last one I'm going to get into is humans. Humans are interrupters in nature's or the natural food chain. Scavenger food chain. And this one, Natalie doesn't like because it's too graphic, but you have a deer that eats plants, and then a car comes along and hits the deer, and this deer had been killed by a car, and the black vultures come and then eat the deer. Vultures play a very important part in our world, and they get rid of things that decay and parasites and so on and so forth. They're very amazing creatures. Now this was a picture of a white ibis landing, and this was shot at Lake Morton in Lakeland, Florida. And the sign says, "Do not feed bread to birds." Okay. Well, I guess the person felt that, whoever it was, felt that it's okay to feed him cheese doodles, but not bread. Okay. So he fed this white ibis a cheese doodle, and that's what that white ibis has got in its mouth, is a cheese doodle. Doesn't belong there. So don't feed animals cheese doodles. My favorite photo at there is a white pelican at that lake. You sit on a bench, you watch these birds come in and out, and you watch them fish. Watch that anhingas catch fish, and I love this one because it's a white a white pelican landing, and it's just I love that photo. And that was on Lake Morton in Florida. For those of you who have eaten Moxies on 120, off at the end of 120 by the mill, there's a squirrel that will beg for French fries. And we intervene with them, and we feed them things they shouldn't be eating. They shouldn't be eating French fries. It's okay to eat nuts, but I don't know. French fries are a little bit greasy. And so I took a trip to Costa Rica, and this guy jumps out of a boat with a piece of a chicken leg. And no kidding, he's feeding this 12-foot caiman chicken wings. You know, this is human intervening in something that doesn't belong there. You know how this is going to end one day, right? One day, and this is Photoshop, this is not real. One day, that caiman is going to end up eating the human. Okay, you shouldn't be feeding animals like caimans anything because they get used to it. And this is Photoshop. This is not a real photo for those years kind of getting hungry here. Apex predators. I don't have many apex predators except the ones that I photograph in the zoo. And I don't have any apex predators eating anything. But the Komodo dragon will eat big animals, and they bite them, and their bacteria and venom will kill the buffalo. The bald eagle, as you know, will fish, will steal from other creatures, the lions, of course, tigers. And on the left is a list of the apex predators which are on top of the food chain. Where humans are in the food chain, if you look at the primary, secondary, and if you label them one, two, three, humans fall out at 2.1. They're about at the same level as a pig. So without technology, we would be in big trouble in the food chain. Okay, so I hope that you have a better handle on the food chain, the producers, the primary, secondary, tertiary consumers, and the decay. Uh, and let's see if we checked out the objectives. I hopefully I described the camera equipment and settings. I defined the food chain in Navores. I showed you photos of nature's food chains that I photographed, showed you locations of the food chains, and explained one nature fact new to you, hopefully. And I thought it'd be kind of cool to leave with a quote, but I'm not smart enough to do that. So I asked ChatGPT to come up with a quote. And it says, as we gaze through the photos of nature's food chains, we are reminded of the interconnectedness of all living beings, each playing a vital role in the eternal cycle of life. So that's the nature's food chain. And I hope that we can learn a lot from the kissing bees to be kind to one another in our world today. You know, when you see all the what's happening, I find the kissing bees always brings me back to, be kind to one another. So, Engaging Nature's Heart is the name of my weekly series. That's my email address, and that's the end of the presentation. I'll address any questions if there are any.
Well, Michael, that was fantastic.
I'm
And by
glad
the
you.
way, there was one or two things that I learned I didn't know before.
Oh, good.
In fact, much more than one.
Oh, good. The
How
belted
about
ca-
it? Anybody else got any questions? I think maybe it was too much.
too much. I hope I didn't freak out the person who was worried about the eating part of it.
I don't think you did. It was great. The
Okay.
chats in here very well done.
Okay, great.
Very enjoyable. We all appreciate your time and the work you put together to putting that together.
Well, it's my
Thank you
pleasure.
so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Michael.
you so much, Michael.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rob. Yeah. Did
And
I?
there being no more questions, I think we're going to let her rip.
Okay.